Yeah, we are in live, sir.
Okay, fine. Right. So, good evening, everyone. Some of the people are joining, and I hope you are able to hear me. Uh, I'll wait for 5 more minutes. Some of the other people are joining online. So, meanwhile, if you are a student who have taken this course, please feel free to mention your questions or any concerns in the chat box. So, we will in the coming 1 hour time. So we will deal with the questions or any particular concern you have, please mention it here. Okay. Uh, I hope you are able to hear me. We have three TAs of this course, uh, Miss Doyle, Miss Purnima, and Mr. Sai. Doyle or Purnima, can you please uh, just mention if you are able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, fine. Thank
Yes.
you. Uh, So Doyle, Purnima and Sai, please take a note of any questions in the chat box, and in the coming hour, we will discuss that. What I'm going to do today, uh, I'm trying to uh, give you a quick overview of the course. By the way, I'm Santosh Abraham. I teach at IIT Madras, and this course is international movement. And currently, now I hope you are on week third of this course, and we have 12 weeks, and the course will be ended in October. October, you can some of you, if you are interested, you can take the course also, course exam also. Right. So the plan today, like in another 10 minutes time, I will be giving you a few review of the course, which are the themes which have already started. Then you can, if you have any particular concern, questions and all, you can mention it in the chat box. You can also ask, but it will be good if you can mention in the chat box. And in the coming hour, we will try to answer that. Uh, With regard to the examination pattern and all, some questions are coming. I will answer at the end about the question pattern and all. Uh, uh, but before that, let me go to the topics, and you can note down this question and I'll get back to you. Right. So, as mentioned, international movement is the study of India's freedom struggle. And we have started with the early establishment of British colonial rule and try to find out what are the kind of reforms that British initiated in India. So the week one, I had discussed about the emergence of British rule, particularly through the works of the early uh, governor generals in India, and try to understand two important concerns that have been brought out by the British in India, that is Orientalist concern and Anglicist concern. And uh, these concerns, especially the Anglicist concerns and Orientalist concerns, were expressed through several reforms, like in the field of education, in the field of revenue reforms, in the field of legal reforms, etc., in India during the first 100 years of British rule. And in the first part of the module, we discussed about the land revenue patterns. I hope you understood the permanent settlement, Raitwari settlement, and Mahalwari settlement, which were uh, introduced by the British during the first 100 years of the British rule in India. After these early reforms, including the legal reforms, for example, British, along with the revenue reforms, also introduced legality in India. That particular legal concepts were very different from whatever the kind of legality that Indians experienced during the Mughal as well as in the ancient period. You know that in India, legal concerns or legal system, that was very much not at all rigid, or it was very much flexible. But along with that flexibility, most of the legal concepts were very much centered around caste and other kinds of issues with regard to the society. So it is to this different multiple systems of legality that British introduced colonial codes. Secondly, Indian revenue systems, collection of revenue, were different from region to region. Each kingdom, each chieftains, according to their understanding, according to their regional interest, they might have collected revenue different forms. So when the British came into the scene, through these three important revenue patterns, they attempted to introduce or systematize or organize the revenue collection in India through Raitwari, Mahalwari, and permanent settlement. And in the field of education, this education in the beginning, especially under Orientalism, we see that the British introduced several kinds of translations, trying to understand Indian society, trying to promote Indian literary texts which are translated into English. But in the later stages, by the early 19th century, we see that from Cornwallis period onwards, there is some sort of Anglicization tendencies emerged in India, where British introduced English education in India. And such kind of English education introduced by the British, there were actually takers from India, and mostly the upper elite classes who were interested in learning about the Western systems, learned English language, and British largely hoped that English education, or through their Anglicization tendencies, Anglicization outlook, they largely wanted to create Indians English in taste, English in opinion. So they wanted ultimately to, uh, change the behavior, the people's behavior in India through English education. So in the first 100 years, we see several such English-centric, British-centric reforms, though it was spread among Orientalism as well as Anglicization. It was spread among different multiple, interest of the British officials. Then, after in the same period, especially during the 100 years period of time, we also see that Indians, the educated elite classes, educated Indians, mostly from the elite upper classes. They got education. Some of them, after their early education in the missionary-centric schools, etc., in India, they might have gone abroad and got a new degree from abroad in London. Such kind of individuals, starting from Ram Mohan Roy onwards, we see that they attempted to question the existing tradition, customary practices. They have largely been influenced by what was happening in the Western world. And we discussed in the first week these kinds of social reforms, including how women questioned like abolition of sati, widow remarriage, etc., were questioned by the educated elite classes. Such social reform tendencies were the early responses of the Indians to that of British rule or British early reforms. Finally, in the week one, we discussed about the religious reform movements, where Indian religious conditions were also questioned by individuals who are inspired by Western centric ideologies. And such kind of reforms, not only these were influenced by Western centric notions, but some of the reforms, like the reforms among the reforms led by uh, Phule and Srinarayana Guru, etc., in India, were actually reforms started from below. There were also reform efforts in both in Hindu religion as well as in the Islamic religion in the form of Aligarh movement. So all these reforms, including social and religious reforms, were the early responses of the Indians to the British rule. So in this context, the week one, we discussed about what all ways British reformed India and what all ways Indians responded to such kind of reforms in the form of social and religious reforms in India. That was the first major theme that we discussed in this course. The second module, we discussed about how these early, very positive kind of sentiments, in fact, ended or continued in certain ways. But in that particular phase, in the first 100 years of British rule, as well as 150 years of British rule, India witnessed several kinds of resistances. Maybe a very handful of educated elite classes or religious reform oriented individuals might have uh, attempted to uh, receive the British or Western centric ideas, but larger section of Indian population, including the peasant community, tribal community, the civil chieftain communities, etc., resisted British. Uh, these communities might have not received any kind of positive impacts, positive reforms by the British, but they were economically or financially completely affected. So, such kind of individuals, such kind of communities in India reacted against the British. So, in the second module, we try to understand uh, the civil rebellions in India, peasant rebellions in India, tribal rebellions in India, three important areas in which we try to understand how Indians resisted the British. And unfortunately, we could identify that none of these rebellions were successful. Most of the rebellions might have shown their uh, organizational capacities or organizational efficiencies, as well as their resistance to the mighty colonial power. But unfortunately, at the end, many of these resistances came to an end or suppressed by the British through their mighty military. Uh, so these rebellions, though we understood these rebellions as a rebellion which were not successful, but at the same time, we see that this is how Indians responded to the British system, British uh, methods, British reforms, etc. So we could see that certain section of the communities in India, educated elite classes, welcomed most of the reforms, but at the same time, almost simultaneously, a larger section of the people resisted violently by using war and other methods. Uh, uh, they fought against the British. Finally, in the second module, we discussed about the very important rebellion during the exact 100 years period of time, or the 100th year happened in India in the form of 1857 revolt. Particularly, this was treated as a military revolt, happened conducted among the Shipois. But I hope you might have gone through the entire module videos where you might have identified, understood that 1857 revolt, though its initiated started as a Shiboi mutiny, largely later spread among different society, different sections of the people, including the civil leaders, peasantry, common man, etc., were part of this revolt. So this was one of the considered as one of the very successful as well as a brilliant kind of resistance that Indians, developed during the 100th year of British rule in India. And this particular revolt, though finally it ended with a failure, it did not create much of, uh, you know, tensions for the British, but certainly British understood that from this revolt, though it was failed, British understood that there is something wrong with the way in which the East India Company functioned in India. So after 1857, we could identify that after the Sheboy Mutiny or after the First War of Independence, uh, the entire organizational structure of British rule in India changed. East India Company was removed from the scene. In that particular place, British Crown and the Parliament directly took care of the Indian affairs. So since 1857, a major organizational changes witnessed in the Indian subcontinent in the form of early Governor General has been removed or changed its position to a viceroy. And since then, we have viceroy as an important person who is in charge of Indian affairs, along with the Secretary of the State as Crown's representative in India. So we see that from that particular moment onwards, everything what was happening in India in the form of acts and other council reforms, etc., were actually coming from Viceroy and the Secretary of the State. So that is what exactly in the later stages we are yet to reach that particular module, but we see that 1909, 1919 Act and all were called as Mindo-Morley reforms, Montagu-Chelmsford reforms in the early 20th century. So these were the reforms introduced by Viceroy and the Secretary of the State. So that is actually the crucial organizational administrative changes that India witnessed after 1857. And by 1857, up to 1857, we discussed about resistances and the positive responses in the form of socio-religious reform movements, etc. in India. Now, after this particular period, after 1859, 57, we see that the resistance in India have become more serious, academic resistances. This is where Indians like Dadabhai Navroji and Firoz Shah Mehta, Ranade, etc., came up with a very strong criticism against the British, which we call it as economic criticisms. And during this particular period, Indians, those academic oriented Indians, or very serious leaders who were educated abroad, or maybe in another way we call it as the upper middle classes who got educated, they became more critical about the Indian British Indian economical situation, British Indian rule in India. So this was something like a very different type of criticism that British received from India. So starting from 1757, British faced several kinds of criticisms as well as resistances, either violent form or either positive form, etc. But starting from 1715 and post 1859 period, British received academic criticisms. And it is in this particular context why academic criticisms developed by Dadabhai Navroji and others about India's real status, how India became a region with famines, lots of peasantry struggles, etc. So they were trying to theorize whatever was happening in India up to 1859, 1857. That was one of the major criticisms developed, and they try to understand what really happened in the context of handicrafts industries, traditional, products in India. Apart from that, they also try to understand what is the real reason of famines in India. So there were several kinds of attempts. There were several kinds of uh, explanations, academic explanation given raised by the educated elite classes or educated classes in India against the British. So you might have already gone through the drain theory and the question of deindustrialization, what really happened to the agriculture, all these things might have been understood, or you might have checked in the week 3. The final aspect in the week 3 was about how, apart from these academic criticisms, how a different intelligentsia, we call it as middle class intelligentsia, develop in India in majorly in 3 important locations in India. One is Calcutta, Bombay, Madras, South Indian kind of region. Through them, a very different political mob was developing in India. More of, I would call them as aware citizens. Aware citizen in that way, we can understand one who is aware of the real character of the British, one who is aware of the power of institutions like law and police, judiciary, etc., aware of uh, our own rights. So all these kind of um, uh, ideas were circulated or taken to the or spread among, especially among the educated intelligentsia in India, in different areas, different regions in India. Most of these, intelligentsia attempted to react to the British academically with forming political associations, and in the module 4 onwards, which will be released in the, or you might have already seen in the, in the portal, module 4 onwards, we are going to discuss how all these development of educated intelligentsia, educated criticisms, academic criticisms, economic criticisms, etc., resulted into the development of nationalism in India. Various political associations, organizations were developed in India, and which got accomplished since the birth of 1885 Indian National Congress. India was starting to experience a national freedom struggle, a very politically oriented struggle that has developed since 1885. So India's freedom struggle entered into a different, very active phase since 1885, and that is what we are yet to identify in the coming weeks. So far we discussed about 3 important aspects. One is the resistance part of Indians, the social reform part of the British India, and also the economic criticisms developed by educated intelligentsia in India. So these were the quick recap of what all things that we have identified or we have studied in the last 3 modules. And now I will, if you have any particular concerns or anything, particularly on the topics initially, please ask the topics about the topics now, and later for other kinds of exam and related sources and other things. If you have a question, you can note down, and we will try to answer on one go. Right. So you can if you have a particular concern, you can.
Good evening, sir. S- Sir, can you hear me? Okay. Uh, Sir, this is
Please
regarding,
carry on.
yeah. I just want to know, is there a transcript available for your videos that you have made?
Currently, uh, immediately it is not available, but we are
Okay.
in the process of making the transcript, which will be released maybe I think in a matter of 1 week or something, they will release
Okay.
it. So
Okay, sir.
I don't know whether the office will release it, entirely the transcript in one go, or according to the completion of the week 1 or week 5, they may release
Okay,
it.
sir.
So, but
But
I can.
will we be notified about the same?
Yes, definitely. in
Okay.
the
Okay.
transcript, because I hope you are getting updates on whatever is happening.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right, right.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
And there was a question about physiocrats ideology. Doyle, you have answered. Sai, you have answered that, but you can also maybe talk about that if you it's possible. You can read out for the sake of others also.
Yeah.
One of you, please, Doyle or Sai.
Yes, sir. So the question was, uh, it was asked by user. Okay. So in respect of permanent settlement, Ranjit Guha talks about physiocrat's ideology, how it's different from mercantilist ideology. So I've answered. Ramchandra Guha explains that permanent settlement system in Bengal was inspired by physiocratic ideology, which saw land as a fundamental source of wealth and aimed to establish a class of zamindars with fixed hereditary revenue obligations. This contrasted with mercantile ideology. This contrasted with mercantile ideology, which emphasized state control over trade and wealth accumulation through commerce. So physiocrats favored minimal state intervention and productive landowners, while mercantilists prioritized trade regulation and revenue maximization. Guha argues that despite its physiocratic basis, the settlement led to neo-feudal system rather than fostering the capitalist agriculture.
As this particular course, if you look at, if we have that statistics of the total members who have joined in this course, most of the participants in this course belong to the +2 or the school classes. So our classes, our intention is to make our concepts reachable to all sorts of people. For example, we have uh, above 50 years, uh, almost around 50 people have joined the course. So our intention is to make it accessible to those who are studying in school and those who have completely moved out of the education or maybe out of the school. So some of the things we are not going into more in advanced level, and we cannot go into very micro level also. So certainly, as one of you have asked, we can recommend the readings. And some of the readings I have already mentioned in the course structure, course module in that NPTEL portal. Uh, for example, this Ranajit Guhas or Ramchandra Guhas kind of works certainly being used if you are a faculty or if you are a person who is teaching to the students. You can make a note of that. But you are always free to approach me with your particular concern, uh, maybe a particular theme which you need better sources and all. I will be happy to help you with the materials or certain kinds of recommendation we can certainly make. So immediately I cannot say, but most of these course structure or course themes which I'm trying to teach from Ishida Banerjee Dubey's history of. You might have seen that book. I don't know, like this is the book. Not very clear, but right. So this is like a history of modern India by Shida Banerjee Dubey. So this is a very good book, not very elementary level, but not too advanced level too. So this is the book which I'm particularly using in this because of that. I think because of that blurred it is not visible, but History of Modern India by Ishita Banerjee Dubey. That is the first book being used. Second book is quite, you might have been very familiar with that book. That is Struggle for India's Independence by Bipin Chandra and Sumit Sarkar's Modern India. Shegar, yeah, right. So it's here. From Palasi to Partition, Shegar Bandhopadhyay's work. So we are using 3 or 4 basic books to discuss the themes. Some of the themes I have also mentioned from my research. Some of the themes, some of my students' themes also I have discussed. So in the coming section, we will also be using many other micro uh, articles to give you sense about. For example, we are almost reaching towards modern Gandhian period of Indian nationalism. So there we will be using particular pages, particular articles, particular historians' views, etc. In the coming sections. You know that Indian national movement or history of British India is it's a very, very vast syllabus. It is very difficult to point out or extra details to be given under is very difficult. But I have tried to, I have attempted to include most of the important events and important arguments in this. If you require anything in particular, please feel free to contact me. I will happy to help. Sai and Doyle and Purnima, any other questions? Like,
Sir, we have one more question, sir. So should I read out the question? So the question goes this way. I am not able to digest the interpretation of tribal uprisings. Tribal demands were more or less same control over the resources and land. After 60 years of independence, Indian state through Forest Rights Act gave them some rights. The the Rights Act gave them some things they were demanding 200 years ago. Shouldn't it be called ecological nationalism instead of proto or pre-nationalist or knowledge of economic concepts necessary to be called as nationalist?
see, we are not particularly dealing with the post-independence era because you know that post-independence period, many of these concerns not been addressed by the state, in fact, and maybe the tribal society are in the same way resisting, raising their voices in various ways in the contemporary period. That is been understood, but I am not going to discuss about the contemporary concerns here. But what we identify in the earlier context, uh, uh, something which was not at all affected. For example, the age-old tribal settings in India were not at all affected with any other outside interferences. For example, if you look at the pre-British period cases, such tribal society in India might have not been affected or interfered with any particular concerns from the state systems. Occasionally, people might have, for example, one way of conducting, interfering in the tribal society is to get hold of resources as well as to, enter into the domain of wildlife hunting and other things. That might have been parallelly happening, but we see that a very serious control over their locations might have not at all happened till 1757. So it is after 1757, much of the Indian tribal society might have been heavily affected. So what we have identified, we try to understand the immediate reasons for their struggles in India during the during the British period. So that particular struggles, most of the struggle that we discussed in our themes were actually mostly happened during the 100 years of the British rule in India. And we see that when tribal resistance were more happening in India, especially by 1870s, British in fact attempted to control them through law. So we see that use of law by the end of 19th century and early 20th century was the logic through which British extended their control in controlling the tribal society, peasantry society, even in the national movement period, controlling the press, controlling uh, uh, the movement of the people, or seditious writing, revolutionary activities, everything being brought under the control of law here. So we see that the post-independent state, whether you call it as um, you know uh, the concerns developed after 1950 as ecological nationalism or any kind of concept, I would say that most of the time the current or the post-colonial Indian state system might have failed to recognize the plight of the tribal society, and such kind of uh, principles, such kind of issues might have been very active even today. So I understand that. I agree to your point. But the way in which we call them, I would recommend seriously to uh, look at Magesh Rangarajan's work on India's uh, tribal rights as well as forest rights. So he has very successfully linked the post-independence period history with that of early British history. So I would suggest you to look at Magesh Rangarajan's, even Ramachandra Guha's kind of works and all will help you to identify the post-colonial tensions, especially in dealing with the tribal society that is currently happening. So it is still, there is no end to it. It is still happening. So I'm not a very good expert in that post-colonial understanding of tribal society, but certainly I understand your question. Any other question, Sai? With
no more,
regard to the, yeah, please.
so no more questions, sir.
Yeah, with
Regarding
regard to the pattern of the examination,
exam, yeah.
uh, there was one question in the beginning. Pattern of the examination. Uh, we will have the MCQs, multiple choice question. As you might have currently, you might be doing the weekly assignments. Though it is called as assignments, it is actually the multiple choice question. The same multiple choice questions will be there for your end of semester or end of the course examination. The pattern number of questions, I think it will be 50 questions that you have to attempt. Now every week you are attempting 10 questions. I think the last questions, we are yet to finalize that, but mostly we will go on with the 50 questions for 100 marks, two marks each. So it will be multiple choice questions. There is no descriptive because the large number of students have registered, so we cannot uh, conduct any written test or anything. But uh, as I mentioned earlier, please feel free to contact because some of these concepts are very, uh, what we have discussed in this whole section would be a macro understanding of the concept. If you have a particular period understanding, if you want to know more about, if you want to develop as part of your research and all, feel free to contact me with the help of other sources and all. I will try to help you with that. That I promise. Currently, this course, I'm yet to complete the course recordings. So we are, that is why the transcript of availability of transcript also is yet to happen because we are currently, this course is being introduced in the first time. And since there are larger materials, we couldn't complete the course on time, but we are on schedule. There is no delay or anything. But for transcript, it may take few more days, I think. That is what I understood. But you will get the weekly videos, you will get the weekly assignments that are all on drawn. That's happening currently. There is no delay for that. So you can free to, go ahead with the course. Somebody has mentioned a question. There is a question, but there is no question here. In case if you want to ask, you can ask.
இப்ப ஸ்பீச்சிங்ல ஏதோ அந்த கஸ்டமர்ஸ் வந்துட்டாங்கப்பா அவர்
I'm not able to register for exam. There would be some email or contact number of NPTEL, but just have a look at that, because I think registration, you have time till one more week, I think. So if you have problem with the registering for the exam, I think you have exam registration, you have time up to August 15, one more week. So in case if you are finding a difficulty, please get in touch with the NPTEL office. They will help you with that. Because I don't have any control on the registration part.
Sir, we have one more question, sir.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand. As I mentioned, the modern India is very vast. So, very traditional universities and colleges, you know that the modern India is being taught in different levels. For example, the universities like Hyderabad and JNU and all, they introduced modern India, um, like the early social reforms or social religious reforms itself is one particular course. So, as you mentioned, there are many themes and many events occurs at one point of time. So, in this particular concept, while looking at the first 100 years period of British rule, I trying to, locate it in the context of continuity and discontinuity. In one of the weeks, last concluding part, I have mentioned that. So, we see that uh, many debates are there about modern India. For example, if you look at the early modern India or late medieval India onwards, late medieval, that is what your question, right? From the late medieval to modern time. Let us take the case of late medieval to the early modern. So this is where I have mentioned as a concluding section of one of the weeks, as this particular period is largely uh, discussed by the Cambridge historians as uh, uh, you know as a continuity within the continuity discontinuity debate. So many scholars largely felt that there is a continuity happened in India during the early British rule, as the early British rule did not make any significant change in India. They most of the time they continued with the traditional, especially the medieval pre-modern concepts. For example, I have mentioned in some of the concepts that if you look at the way in which British organized labor in India, uh, we have discussed that in connection with the cash crops cultivation, British recruited labor from the plantations, labor to the plantations. Those laborers were recruited from the indigenous uh, native villages in many parts of India, including Tamil Nadu, Assam, Bengal kind of region. So while when the British recruited such kind of laborers, we could see a very continuity pattern there. For example, if you see British as a very modern factory system society with the more of regular patterns of recruitment and other things, they did not follow that. Instead, while recruiting the laborers itself to the plantations, they followed a system of caste because they particularly aimed to recruit one particular caste from a village so that according to British, controlling them will be easy. Similarly, they might have recruited people from one village to one particular plantation. Just for disciplining them would be easy. So we see that in many attempts, including the labor recruitment, there is one micro example. British used, the pre-colonial modes, pre-colonial systems. With regard to the legal system also, you might have noticed that earlier, the first maybe 50 years period of time, Lord Warren Hastings period of time and all, uh, British did not attempt to change the traditional Hindu-Muslim legal codes in India. They tried to translate and use it in India. So we see that many times the first 100 years of period of time, when you look at the history, it's large, as you said, but we can easily identify the concerns by using this logic of certain kinds of logic. One of the logic I have mentioned, one of the theoretical understanding, you can place it in the context of continuity and discontinuity. But at the same time, we see that when you understand the discontinuity pattern, English education itself is a discontinuity logic. Uh, Bringing models of English systems, English, institutions, etc. It's a clear example of discontinuity. So there is one way of looking at the late medieval to the modern period. Another important concept is we have already mentioned about 18th century debate. So 18th century is considered as a landmark period in the Indian history when India moved towards modernity. India remained with a later medieval system. So many scholars attempted to understand this was a period of Mughal decline. This was a period of industrial development. So you can even easily put this period into 18th century debate, continuity, discontinuity debate, and all. So I would say that up to 1870, you can call it as, or up to the birth of Indian National Congress, the entire Indian society was, or the way in which British looked at the Indian society was almost like a very tradition-oriented society. Since then, up to that particular period, Indians were also living with that tradition. But after 1885, maybe we can take it as a landmark of birth of the Indian National Congress onwards, Indians were becoming more like an aware citizen, aware of their rights, aware of the power of law, aware of what kind of rights they are not experiencing. All these tendencies, even questioning our own tradition, etc., became more and more uh, active in the post 1885 period. So I would say that by looking at all the history, you can divide these periods, major events, especially the early period, you can locate it in the context of certain debates. Then later, when you understand from Indian national movement active phase, Gandhian phase. Gandhi is one particular concept through which around Gandhi you can think about. But at the same time, moving out of Gandhi, that is what we have already mentioned. I have mentioned in the first slide that Gandhian as well as Nehruvian or leadership's perspectives of Indian national movement is one way of approaching this entire concept. But another way of approaching is what Ranajit Guha and others have identified through subaltern context, where Shahid Amin kind of individuals attempted to understand the plight of Chauri Chaura's society, various working class movements, what did experience in the bottom, in the local level, regional level. These were some of the methods through which we can understand the period, active period of Indian national movement. But while teaching, if you are a teacher, if you are a faculty, while teaching the same concept to the student, we cannot ignore uh, the the major events, major people associated with international movement. We have to build our understanding through the history from above, and we have to identify what was happening in the bottom, especially the history from below also. So I would say that there are different ways in which we can attempt these individual events, multiple events, hundreds of events are there. So you have to bring it in certain context. Any other questions if you have? We have another 10 more minutes. If you have any particular concerns, please feel free to ask. In the course syllabus, I'm following almost the same type of structure, but there could be some sort of changes in between. Sometimes some of the themes might have been pushed to the next module due to the time constraints and all. Secondly, in the course module, I have mentioned main books. Different chapters in those books would be used. So I have mentioned Vipin Chandra's work, Sumit Sarkar work, Shekhar Bandyopadhyay's and Ishida Banerjee Dubey's work as a major test to be used. These are the tests which I base my argument. I take my arguments and concepts from. But apart from that, there are several other books which I have mentioned, particular context of uh, the concepts, etc., would be there in that particular books. Those who are interested in social reforms, particularly the abolition of sati. So you might have understood about a debate around which the sati abolition happened as one of the major first social reforms in India. So for this, I have partially taken from one of the very important work, which you can, if you're interested in that kind of history, social reforms, please have a look at Ledamani. The title of the work is Contentious Traditions. So it has a debate on sati in colonial India. So this particular work has come as an article, also as a chapter in one of the books. So the details I have given it in the course syllabus. So you can have a look at that.
सोर्स बदल के टीवी ऑफ कर टीवी ऑफ कर मैं सोच पा रहा हूँ
If there are no more questions or clarifications, we can again come back after. So now we are running third week. Maybe I would again come back after while you take the seventh week or sixth or seventh week. I can again come back and we can have a more discussion on that. But if you have a particular question in your mind, please feel free to uh, send us through that question section in the portal. We'll be happy to respond. Even you can send us uh, individual emails with regard to that. We'll be happy to assist. So otherwise, if you do not have questions, any more questions, please we will conclude this section here.